Hi, Heather and John. How are you, John?
Good, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning, Heather.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm visiting my mom in Connecticut, and I think she's going to come into our class.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I like your hat.
Oh, thank you. I made it.
Oh, I love the style and I love the color. I love that apple.
Okay, it's supposed to be a flower.
Oh, I see it. Oh, how pretty, Heather. Yeah.
So I had years ago made blankets and hats for the kids. And a few years ago, I thought, okay, I have leftover yarn.
Yeah.
And I just started designing some hats.
Yeah.
Or sound patterns. And then,
Oh, yeah.
anyhow.
Did you hear that some people are crocheting or knitting hats for the soldiers?
They're knitting, not crocheting. And I don't knit.
Oh, they're knitting. Okay.
Yes, I definitely have.
Yeah. 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 I also don't knit. Yeah. I used to crochet. It's been a long time.
I could help you with the crocheting if you want to get back to that.
Yeah. All right. I have to see how yeah, because in the,
Wait. I should go back. I'm a left-handed person.
oh.
So while I could help you, if you're righty, we crochet in different directions.
Correct. I know. Yeah. All right.
You know,
Probably wouldn't work
I
then.
used to, I did knit at one point, but I don't know all the ins and outs and what to do if you drop
Sure.
stitches and stuff. Maybe at
Yeah.
some point I'll pick that up.
Yeah. My grandmother used to knit, I remember. But
What?
Grandma Yetta used to knit.
Oh, yeah, she did.
Yeah, I have some of the scarves and the vests that she made also.
She used to make socks for people in the army.
Really?
During the war.
We were just talking about how some people are knitting hats for the Israel Defense Force.
Sure.
And my own grandmother used to knit socks for the World War II soldiers.
Ah, socks are important.
She made a little outfit up.
Green, I remember the two-piece.
Make anything.
Yeah. So I'll introduce you. These are this is my mom, Ruth Brainin, my friends Heather and John Rosenthal.
Hi. What is your mom's last name?
Brainin, Brainin.
Okay, I have a cousin whose last name is Brainin.
Brainin.
I will check with her later today that's how she spells it.
Yeah. What's is that her married name?
That's her maiden name.
Oh.
Brainin.
What's her first name?
Zelda.
Not that we know of a Zelda Brainin, but
Zelda.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
It's an unusual name, so.
Yeah. Maybe named for someone named Zachariah.
No, I meant Brainin.
Oh,
I
that
don't know.
too.
Yeah. Hi, Jill.
And that's the rabbi.
Jill, you're mute.
Cheses.
Morning, everybody.
Hello.
Morning.
Hello, Boker Tov. Good morning
Boker
to
tov.
all.
Good
Boker
morning.
tov.
Rabbi, this is my mom, Ruth Grainen. I'm visiting her in Connecticut, and this is Rabbi Noah Cheses.
Hi, Rabbi.
Welcome, Ruth. So nice to have a mother-daughter learning going on this morning. What a
Thank
treat.
you. What class?
Hopefully we'll have some sun poke out this afternoon. I heard on the weather report that we haven't had sunshine in 6 days. It's been cloudy for that
Sounds
long.
right.
So we're hoping that
Just like Ithaca.
we can get a little bit more light in the atmosphere this afternoon. I want to make mention before we begin that I'd like to dedicate. Jill, where are you? Are you in Florida?
Yes.
Okay.
Aha.
Jill's in Florida.
I was all that light coming into your apartment does
know.
not look like it's in Sharon.
It's not in Sharon. We'll be home tonight.
Okay. Well, I hope you've had some time to soak up some sunlight.
I was with my sister and brother. We were with my sister and brother-in-law. That's all that counts.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you got to spend some quality time with them. Where in Florida is that?
Boca.
Oh, no, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's
Lovely.
okay. If it's okay if you like 80 degrees and humidity and I don't know.
Yeah.
Personally,
Sounds good to
I'm
me.
ready to come home.
Yeah. The cold beckons you. It's New England beauty to see a gray sky and snow-covered, trees.
There are advantages. Gilbert is out for breakfast with his brother-in-law.
Oh, that's
And
so
they went out
sweet.
for dinner and had tomahawk. They shared a tomahawk steak.
Oh,
for dinner.
wow.
So you know what? There are advantages, but
Yeah.
Okay, what is a tomahawk steak?
it's this huge piece of meat.
It sounds like it's gargantuous.
It is.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to just post the source sheet here, and we'll begin in just a moment.
Can you
Let's
make
see.
that louder?
Okay. Here we go. And I want to dedicate our shir this morning to the memory of one of our participants, Monica Reusner, who has been, in and out of our shir for a while. Last night she passed, and very, very sad news to share. She's been fighting breast cancer for almost 7 years now, and so is precipitous decline at the end, but she always loved joining our shir. And I think she was here just maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I remember her popping on and sharing an insight. She was a child psychologist, a therapist who always had great insights into human nature and people. And she always loved studying the Parsha with her husband, Mark. They actually met through the teachings of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs on the Parsha, and that was part of their courtship. So we'll have her in mind this morning as we learn that our learning should be Le'iloi Nishmata. Our learning should be for the elevation of her spirit, of Miriam, but it was Penina de Roberto. So with that, we'll share screen, and look at the sources for our examination of the Parsha this morning. Okay, welcome, Amy. I see you just joined.
Yeah.
Nice to see you here. Okay.
That Moses.
So
Yes.
this is a big week in terms of Jewish historical events, with the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments. A lot is going on, and I want to focus on a minutia, a very small detail, and try and dig into an answer that will hopefully help us appreciate a little bit more about Moshe's character, and also a little bit more about um, the mentality that we should be having in terms of our own personal versus collective outlook on life. So the question is in the title: why didn't Moshe call his first son Eliezer? So Moshe has two children with Zipporah. The elder one is Gershom. The younger one is Eliezer. So let's look at the description at the very beginning of Parshat Yitro of their names. And based on the description of their names, we will unpack, or we will sort of frame the question of the order of the boys and their names. So let's look at the first few psukim of the Parsha. Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midian. I'm in source number 1 here. So Yitro heard, or we've spent many shiurim in the past talking about what was it exactly that Yitro heard that inspired him to come. So Yitro, who was the Kohen of Midian, he was a priest in the town of Midian, Choten Moshe. He was also the father-in-law of Moshe, right? So we see both of these titles, and is there significance to the order of these titles? That first he was a religious leader, and then he was the father-in-law, right? What's sort of, he's identified in several different ways here. Et kol asher asa Elohim leMoshe. So what is it that Yitro heard? He heard all of the things that God did for Moshe and Uli Yisrael and the Jewish people, Amo, his nation. Yotziat Hashem et Yisrael Mitzrayim. So all of the things that he did, because after all, Hashem had taken the Jewish people out of Egypt. So there's a lot to explore about that pasuk. Why was it that Yitro was motivated to come based on what he heard and to become a part of the Jewish people, whereas others heard the same stories of the miracles that transpired at the Yam Suf with the Makot, but they didn't come. So there was something about Yitro's hearing. He was a listener who had a great capacity to absorb the information that he was listening to, and to be responsive to it and motivated by it. And so he made a huge lifestyle change based on what he was hearing. So we're going to put the focus on Yitro aside and move to Moshe. But I see, Heather, you have a comment.
That's a question. Who did Jethro hear it from? Did Hashem actually speak to Jethro, or was it by rumor, by gossip?
So I think it was by word of mouth. There, we don't have any description of a conversation or a revelation from Hashem to Yitro. It seems from the way the Midrash paints it that word had spread, that these legends of the splitting of the sea and description of the plagues had spread throughout the nations of the world. And Midian is not so far from Mitzrayim. It's actually was considered to be part of the Egyptian, excuse me, part of the Egyptian Empire. Word spread from shepherd, to shepherd
Yeah.
and made its way to Yitro. And then he knew that his son-in-law was involved in the project of taking the Jewish people out of Egypt. After all, those were the terms that he left on when Moshe asked permission from his father-in-law to take his daughter and grandchildren away from him. He said, I've got a mission, I've got a calling, and Yitro says, go. And so now, Yitro was probably reading the daily papers and waiting for, the word. And the paper came to him about all that transpired. And he said, okay, like that's pretty remarkable. The Midian, Times reported this, and I'm going to pick up and leave.
And then
So moving along to the next pasuk, Vayikach Yitro choten Moshe et Zipporah eshet Moshe achar shilucheha. So Yitro was coming not alone, but with his daughter and with their and with his two grandsons. And so the Torah knows that these these family members of Moshe were with him. They left when Moshe left Yitro. So how come they're back with Yitro now? So the Torah says, Archar shilucheha, after she had been sent home, meaning that at some point Moshe felt that it was a little bit risky for his children to be in harm's way, as he was putting a lot of stress on his relationship with Paro, and he knew that maybe his children would be in harm's way. So he sent them back for protection to Midian, which might mean that Zipporah and Moshe's two sons never experienced Yetziat Mitzrayim. They heard a bit of it, but they themselves did not walk through the Yam Suf, which is one approach to why the sons of Moshe never really became insider Jewish leaders, is because they were really separated. They were born outside of the Jewish people, and they spent the critical developmental years away from the Jewish people. So they never really had the credibility or the insider status to do, to take to take the reins for Moshe. So all of that is by way of introducing the identity and the names of these two sons. So now that we've set the stage, let's look at the two boys and why they're called what they're called. So V'yet Shnei Baneha, so in addition to Yitro taking his daughter, he also takes his two grandsons, Zipporah's two sons. At Shem HaEchad, the name of the first one is Gershom. Why is he called Gershom? Ki Amar, because I said to myself, or that is to say, Ger Hayiti Be'eretz Nochriya, right? I was a stranger in a foreign land. So the word Gershom can be broken down into Gersham, stranger there. And so the name describes Moshe's experience in Midian. He had a son in a place that was foreign to him, so he named him after that sort of circumstance that surrounded his birth. Hold on, Janice, I just want to finish this description and then we'll get to your question. V'shem ha'echad Eliezer, and the name of the other one was Eliezer. And why was the second son called Eliezer? Ki Elohei avi ba'ozri, because the God of my father helped me. And Ezri, right? And Eliezer, right? The Ayin, Zayin, Resh are of the same root, right? There's the Eli, Ezer, Elokei, Avi, Ozri, right? God helped me. That's the acronym, or that's the sort of the condensed version of Elokei, Avi, Ozri. And why did Moshe name his second son after this? Vayatzileni micherev Paro, because Hashem saved me from the sword of Paro. So because of that salvation experience, Moshe wanted to mark that gratitude by utilizing it for the name of his second son. So that's what he did. He named him Eliezer. Okay, we got two questions, Janice and then Amy.
It's just a quick on, I mean, the word sham is the word for there, but this is Gershon. Oh, it's Gershom. Oh, but a lot of people say Gershon.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
different name.
Gershom with an M.
So this is Gershom. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Amy?
Okay, well, so my question, so today, when we do a bris milah, that's when the boy gets his name. In those days, I'm not sure, so that's my question. Because remember, Eliezer was born while they were traveling, and that was when Moshe became ill, and that was when Tzipporah took up the flint and gave him the bris. So the question is, at what point did he get the name Eliezer? Was it after Moshe was saved because Tzipporah did the bris milah, or was it just that was the name when he was born?
That's a great segue to the question I wanted to ask here, which is what is this referring to? Which experience is Moshe trying to remember in naming Eliezer? So Amy was suggesting that possibly it was the illness that he had when they were traveling from Midian to Mitzrayim that he was saved from. But the description here is V'yatzileni mecherev paro, that I was saved from the sword of Paro. And that's the experience that Moshe is sort of memorializing in the name of his second son. So what is this a reference to? What episode, what narrative, what story is being described when Moshe says, I'm grateful for being rescued from Paro's sword?
Maybe the baby in the Nile River when he was rescued by Paro's daughter because he could have drowned.
So maybe it's the very early on in his life when he was an infant and Yocheved, his mother, put him in a basket and let him float down the Nile River. And that was the first salvation that he had from Paro's sword, sort of colloquially speaking, Paro's power, when he was able to escape that. So maybe it's about Moshe's birth origin. Heather, what option do you
I was
want to
thinking
suggest?
after Moshe killed the taskmaster who was beating the slave, the Jewish slave.
Great. So indeed, Heather, you are on to what the Midrash says as well. And we're going to get there in the next source. But are there any other possibilities that we want to throw out there in terms of what is Moshe appreciating here in naming Eliezer?
There's the midrash that when Moshe was a baby, the Paro had learned from his magicians that an Egyptian baby was going to take over, and that was one of the reasons why he was throwing the males into the river. But the story of that they took baby Moshe and they sat him before two different objects. One was gold representing the crown, and the other one was a fiery coal to see which one he would touch. And of course, he was going to go for the gold because it was so shiny. But the malach, the angel, moved his hand over and he touched the coal, and that was supposedly when he burned his hand and put it in his mouth. And that whole series of events, so he was saved that way, because had he touched the gold crown, Paro would have taken the sword and killed him.
Right. Okay, that's another great suggestion. So I want to just show what Rashi says on this pasuk. Rashi says, "Vayatzileni micherav paro." What is Moshe referencing? Kish gilu datan va'aviram al davar hamitzri. When two Jews ratted out Moshe, who had killed the Mitzri, ubikesh laharog at Moshe, and Paro sought to kill Moshe as punishment for killing the Egyptian. Na'aset savaro ke'amud shel shaish. So the Midrash says that actually Paro caught Moshe and tried to use his sword to decapitate him, but that Moshe's neck turned into marble, and that he was unsuccessful in killing him. Now, I want to just show you the episode inside of Moshe's killing of the Egyptian and what followed, to sort of give a bit more context to the episode that Rashi is referencing here. So Moshe goes out and he sees that there are two Jews who are fighting one another. So when Moshe approaches them, he hears from one of them that, oh, you are the one that killed the Egyptian. And Moshe gets scared because he knows that the word has spread. Vayishma Paro davar hazeh vayivakesh laharoget Moshe. And indeed, Paro got word of Moshe's killing of the Egyptian, and he sought to kill him. Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro vayeshev beretz Midyan vayeshev al habe'er. So that's when Moshe fled. Once he knew that Paro was trying to kill him, that's when he fled to Midyan. So that's the story that the Rashi is alluding to in terms of what is being referenced here when Moshe says, I'm naming my child after the near-death experience that I had with Paro's sword. It's when Paro was either chasing after him or maybe even captured him and tried to kill him before he was able to escape to Midian and then find Yitro and Tzipporah and start his own family. So now that we have all that context, we can actually return to the initial question, which is about chronology. What happens first? Does Moshe flee from the sword of Paro, or does he land in a foreign place and make a life for himself in a foreign country?
Well, if we consider Egypt a foreign country, was he born and raised? Was he born in Egypt? Were his
Well, we're
parents
talking here
Egyptian?
about his sons, right? So when Moshe has his first son, he names him Gershom because he says, I am now living in a foreign place in Midian, right? And then his second son, he names Eliezer because I was saved from Paro's sword. So the question is, shouldn't the first son of Moshe been named for the salvation from Paro's sword, if that's what happened first? In order to get to Midian, he had to first escape Paro's sword.
But you said Midian was part of Egyptian territory, so it's not like it really was a foreign place.
Well, it was foreign, to Moshe, who was born, in Egypt, and now left, Egypt proper. So it was definitely a different locale that allowed for him to have some sort of safety from, Paro and his, guards. But the question here is about why Moshe chose to name his first son after an experience that happened to him after the experience that he named his second son for. Logically, we would assume that Moshe would want to name his first son after the salvation that he had from Paro's sword. So his first son should be Eliezer. And then his second son would be Gershom. Both were born in Midian. Both were born outside of the land of Egypt. But it would only be logical to name the first son after the first experience, chronologically speaking, and the second son after the second one. So why is it that Moshe names, we should say, why is it that Moshe does not call his first son Eliezer and instead calls him Gershom? Does everyone get the question? Heather, what do you think?
I'll call on Mark first. His hand was up first.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, I can only see two boxes at once. So Mark, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking perhaps Moshe had in mind the historical record that would become established of the Jewish nation, that we were strangers there in Egypt, and then God helped us and we escaped.
Okay, so maybe Gershom is named for being for the experience of the collective Jewish people being in a strange place. The challenge with that is that the pshat of the text itself, where he says, Ki amar ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya. He's talking about it in the first person, where he's saying, I have been a stranger in this foreign land. Right? And so it seems to be based on the present, experience of where his first son was born. Indeed, I just want to look back to see, when Gershon is actually born, and when it's recorded, we see the Teled Bain. I'm reading in the next source here. Vayikra Shemo Gershom ki amar ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya. I have been a stranger in a foreign land. So it's possible when he's talking about it in the past, that he's describing, Mitzrayim, that he was a stranger in Mitzrayim, which then would have happened before being rescued from Paro. But I think the more likely sort of reference point is to Midian, where he ran away from Mitzrayim, where he originated from, and fled to Midian, and that's where he had his first kid, and that was a hard experience for him. So he named his first kid after that feeling of being a foreigner in a foreign, country. So why is it that he gave prominence to that experience over the experience of being saved from Paro, and saved that experience for his second son?
I think because he maybe was feeling that the strangeness of being away from family at the birth of the first child more very prominently at that point, and psychologically that was how he was feeling. He wasn't thinking about being saved by God, but more as, I'm bringing this child into the world and I'm in a strange place doing it.
Great. I think that's a wonderful suggestion about sort of Moshe's current mindset when having a child in a hospital that was not the one that, he was familiar with, in a language, in a culture that he was not accustomed to. And so in the moment, that was perhaps the more prominent sort of emotion of this is not a comfortable setting for me. And so I want to mark that through the name of the child.
Rabbi, I have one other possibility, and it refers to the name of the Parsha, Yitro. I think Moshe had great respect for his father-in-law, and the fact that he had escaped Mitzrayim and he went to Midian, and his father-in-law took him in and gave him a wife. And even though he was a stranger, that to thank his father-in-law, he named the child Gershom out of respect for the father-in-law, and also out of the modesty that, Hashem has just given him this huge mission, and that's why he's leaving, and that's why he's leaving with Eliezer. But he was a humble. He was a man. He didn't know that he was going to become this great leader and whatever. So the first one, Gershom, out of respect for his father-in-law, and the second one, then he wanted to thank Hashem, who's now leading him on this mission.
I
And
like
then,
that a lot.
later on in the parsha, so when Yitro comes to him, it's like Yitro wants to put the shoe on the other foot. Moshe was a stranger in his land and was treated, with the wife and the family and whatever. And now Yitro is coming to Moshe's area, and he's the stranger.
I like that a lot. I want to build on one point that you made in terms of the timeline of the birth of the two sons. You mentioned that Gershom is born soon after, Moshe makes it to Midian and weds Zipporah and starts a family. Obviously, it took, several months at least in order for that process to unfold. But the Torah does not describe the birth of the second son until a while later. And as you mentioned, Amy, we learn about the birth of Eliezer just as Moshe, is preparing to leave Midian to go back to Egypt. And so the sequence of events, the timeline in the Torah is that, Moshe flees to Midian, he marries Zipporah, has their first son, he is a shepherd for many years, and then once he learns that the Paro who was chasing him and wanting to punish him for the crime of killing the Egyptian has died, then he feels like it's safe to go back, and he gets the command from, or I should say the call from Hashem that it's time to go back and to deliver the Jewish people from their taskmasters in Egypt. And then he has a second son as they're leaving, and on the way, he does not give his second son a brit milah, and Zipporah ends up doing it, which heals Moshe's illness, and then they proceed together as a family of 4 to Egypt. And Moshe goes straight into the palace for the negotiation with Paro. So the significance of that timeline is that when Moshe named his first son, he did not yet know whether or not the Jews would be delivered from the hands of Paro. And so the suggestion that I wanted to propose, and it's not my suggestion, it's from Rabbi Chaim Druk, who says that Moshe was unable to thank Hashem for his personal salvation when he knew that the nation, that his extended family, that the Jewish people were still in servitude. And he could not sort of have the joy or the celebration of that salvation until he knew that Bnei Israel was going to be delivered from Paro. And so even though, chronologically speaking, Moshe should have named his first son for Eliezer based on his personal salvation from Paro, he waited until the collective salvation from Paro was in motion to mark that personal salvation, because Moshe's mindset from very early on was deeply enmeshed into that of the Jewish people. When the Torah says, Vayetze vayar besivlotam, that Moshe left the palace and he went and he saw his brothers and experienced their suffering. Part of what made Moshe so special and so unique and so worthy of being chosen for the task of delivering the people from Paro is that he had this deep empathy, this profound sense of shared emotion with the Jewish people. And so the naming of Eliezer was a bit of a, a joyous kind of reason that he had escaped successfully from Paro, but he couldn't actually name a child based on that, joyous event when he still felt the pain and the suffering of his brothers and sisters in Egypt who had not yet been saved. And so only when he had his second son, when he was told by Hashem that the process of redemption has now begun and you're going to be a big part of it, did he feel like he could then mark the personal occasion. Now, you might wonder and might ask, well, shouldn't he have waited until the Jewish people had left Egypt completely and then mark the occasion, by naming a son after that, collective experience? And we could, say that Moshe had so much faith that the process was going to happen that he already was willing to sort of assume that it was a done deal. Or we could speculate that he didn't know if he was going to have more children. Or we could say that we know that Moshe ended up sending his family back to Midian and was without a wife for most of the Exodus narrative. And so the possibility of a third child wasn't really, viable for him. But regardless of whether or not, we can say with any confidence about Moshe's mindset in having another child, we can at least say that the reason that Moshe, or a potential reason why Moshe waited to name a child Eliezer, that God, saved me, that God helped me, is that he didn't feel that he could do that because his own personal identity was so intertwined with that of the collective that he didn't think he could celebrate something personal when the people were still in chains. And so he waited until that unchaining process was already beginning to happen to actually mark that personal rescue story that he had experienced years earlier. So the message of this is to come full circle is about Moshe's character and how he, even in the way that we see he names his sons out of sequence, out of chronological order from the events that the names are marking, that he's doing it with a deep sense of identification with the collective, that he doesn't want to put his own, individual experiences above the experiences of the people. And so he waits patiently to express the appreciation for his salvation until that salvation can, that appreciation can be shared with others as well. So hopefully this gives us a bit of a different appreciation of the names of Gershom and Eliezer, and we can understand why Moshe did not name his first son Eliezer, because it was a bit premature. He wasn't ready yet for that. I also like the other suggestions that were offered here in terms of maybe Moshe feeling the foreigner status so prominently at the birth of his first son that was a factor to name him Gershom and not, Eliezer. or maybe maybe he was referring to the feeling of being a foreigner, even, of being a foreigner in Egypt. Maybe if it wasn't just him being a foreigner, but all of the Ivrim being foreigners in Egypt, and that's what he was marking with the first naming of Gershom. But we can at least put a little bit more sort of thought into these names this week and appreciate the significance of them and the ordering of them.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I have a question on the Brit. The Jewish people, when they were going through the desert, they had to have their Brit before they entered, or right as they were entering Eretz Israel. And I heard the reason that they didn't have it was because in going through the desert, sand could get into, your eyes, into any part of your body, and it could be very dangerous and hurt and not feel well. So I don't know if that's Midrash or if that's Torah, but how would that tie in with Eliezer getting his Brit right there in the desert?
Well, it could explain why Moshe was delaying and not doing it right away. He was concerned about the healing process while they were traveling, but Hashem says otherwise, that he would be fine, and sends a clear message to Moshe to not delay on the Brit. And Moshe seems a little clueless from that episode, and Zipporah seems to be more tuned in, and so she takes care of that, procedure, and make sure that it happens right away. And then Moshe gets better, and they continue their way. So there's a lot more to say about that episode, which was not the focus of this study. But it is possible to speculate to say that maybe that's part of what drove Moshe to not circumcise his son right away, because he was concerned about the conditions in the desert.
Right. Thank you. So did the Jewish people the men not get circumcised till they got to Israel?
Yehoshua makes sure that they do so before entering.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about this topic? Well, I appreciate everyone's participation and involvement. I always love the suggestions and learn from them. So thank you, and look forward to continuing learning next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you,
Shah.
everybody.
everybody.
Okay. Bye.